How's it going, all you boys, grills, and in-between thrills out there? I'm Joe Prime, and today we're going to be looking at my Tormod and Tevesh Szat Commander deck. If you like what you see, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Let's get into it. First up, we have Tevesh Szat, Doom of Fools. He's a Planeswalker for 4 and a black with a starting loyalty of 4. For +2, we can create 2 0/1 black Thrall creature tokens. +1, we may sacrifice another creature or Planeswalker. If we do, draw 2 cards. If the sacrifice creature or Planeswalker is a commander, we can draw an additional card. And then -10, gain control of all commanders. Put all commanders from the command zone onto the battlefield under our control. This is a fantastic Planeswalker. He's in the deck for the ability to create blockers if we need it, and additional draw. That -10 is not so much important because the real MVP of the deck is our other commander, Tormod the Desecrator. He is a 4/2 Zamboni wizard for 3 and a black. Whenever one or more cards leave our graveyard, create a tapped 2/2 black Zamboni creature token. The deck is focused around getting stuff into our graveyard just to take it right back out. He's the true commander of the deck, and if your play group is as whiny as mine is, you can just shuffle the Tevesh Szat right into the 99, and the deck still functions fantastic. For the first section we're going to look at, real quick, is the lands. We have 25 basic swamps. It's a mono black deck, so having easy access to our color mana is going to be great. For special lands, first up we have Bojuka Bog. It's a land that enters the battlefield tapped. It taps for black, but when it enters the battlefield, we exile all cards from target players' graveyards. Chances are we have opponents that are going to be touching their graveyards for stuff, and sometimes we just need to deal with it right away. This is a great tapped land for it. Next up, we have Drownyard Temple. It taps for colorless, but it also has pay 3 to return Drownyard Temple from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. If we end up with this in the graveyard, we can pay 3 to get it right back out, which will trigger our Tormod, which is going to make us a 2/2 black Zamboni creature token. We have Gaia Reach Sanitarium. It's a legendary land that taps for colorless, or we can pay 2 tap. Each player draws a card, then discards a card. High Market taps for colorless, or we can tap, sacrifice a creature to gain 1 life. We're going to be trying to get stuff into our graveyard, like I said, so we can get it right back out to make some Zambonis. Myriad Landscape enters the battlefield tap. It taps for a colorless, or we can pay 2 to tap, sacrifice it to search our library for up to 2 basic lands that share a land type and put them onto the battlefield tapped. Next up, we have Nykthos, Shrine Nyx. It's a legendary land that taps for colorless, or we can pay 2 to tap it to add any amount of mana equal to our devotion. Path of Ancestry enters the battlefield tapped. We can tap it to add 1 color of any in our commander's identity. When we cast a spell that shares a type with our commander, we can scry 1. Reliquary Tower taps for colorless, but we have no maximum hand size. You never know when you're just going to draw a ton of cards. Finally, we have Scavenger Grounds. It's Land Desert, taps for colorless, or we can pay 2 to tap, sacrifice it to exile all cards from all graveyards. Next section we're going to look at is Ramp. First up, we have Crick, Son of Yawgmoth, for 4 and 3 Phyrexian black. He is a 2/2 horror minion with lifelink. For each black pip in our cost, we may pay 2 life rather than pay that mana. Whenever you cast a black spell, put a 1/1 counter on Crick, Son of Yawgmoth. Next up, we have the classic Sad Robot. He's a 2/2 golem for 4. When he enters the battlefield, we may search our library for a basic land, put it on a battlefield tapped, and then when he dies, we're going to draw a card. We have Burnt Offering, an instant for 1 black. We sacrifice a creature to add that creature's casting cost and any combination of red or black mana to our mana pool. We have the classic Soul Ring for 1, we get 2. We have Arcane Signet, cost 2, gets us 1 mana of any color in our commander's identity. We have Nyx Lotus, it enters the battlefield tapped and it costs 4, but it adds mana equal to our devotion. Crowded Crypt, an artifact for 2 and a black. It taps for black, but whenever a creature we control dies, we put a corpse counter on it. Then we can pay 4 black to tap, sacrifice it to create a 2/2 black Zamboni creature token with Decayed for each corpse counter on it. So we have Vessel of Endless Rest for 3. Whenever Vessel of Endless Rest enters the battlefield, we put target card from a graveyard to the bottom of its owner's library. We have Bolas' Citadel. It's a legendary artifact for 3 black. We may look at the top card of our library at any time, and we may play the top card of our library. If we cast a spell this way, we pay life equal to its converted mana cost, rather than paying its mana cost. This next short section is just our advantage. We have Village Rites. It's an instant for a black. As an additional cost, we have to sacrifice a creature, but we draw 2 cards. And then we have Necropotence. For black, 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 it's an enchantment. We skip our draw step. Whenever we discard a card, we exile that card from our graveyard. And then we can pay 1 life, exile the top card of our library face down, put that card into our hand at the beginning of the next end step. This might feel like a non-bow because we're going to be exiling cards that we have to discard, but they do touch the graveyard before they leave, which will trigger our Tormod, creating us a tapped 2/2 black Zamboni creature token. This next section is our removal. We have Crippling Fear. It's a sorcery for 2 black, black. We choose a creature type. Creatures that aren't the chosen type get -3/-3 until end of turn. Next up, we have Dance Macabre. It's a sorcery for 3 black, black. Each player sacrifices a non-token creature. Then we roll a d20 and add the toughness of the creature we sacrifice this way. On a 1 through 14, we return a creature card put into the graveyard this way to the battlefield under our control. For 15+, we return 2 creature cards put into graveyards this way onto the battlefield under our control. We have Mutilate, sorcery for 2 black, black. All creatures get -1/-1 until end of turn for each swamp we control. Feed the Swarm, it's a sorcery for 1 and a black. Destroy target creature or enchantment an opponent controls. We lose life equal to that permanent's converted mana cost. Tormod's Crypt, it's an artifact for 0. We tap, sacrifice it to exile all cards from target player's graveyard. And lastly, we have Bake Into a Pie. It's an instant for 2 black, black. Destroy target creature, create a food token. Bake Into a Pie is a pet card of mine that I put into every black deck, and if you stay tuned for a later video, you'll find out why. This next section is called Ping. All of these cards deal some form of little damage to our opponents. First up, we have Blasting Station. It's an artifact for 3. Tap, sacrifice a creature. Blasting Station deals 1 damage to target creature or player. Whenever a creature comes into play, you may untap Blasting Station. Bantu's Monument. It's a legendary artifact for 3. Black creature spells we cast cost 1 less to cast. Whenever you cast a creature spell, each opponent loses 1 life and we gain 1 life. Zulapur Cutthroat. He's a 1/1 human rogue ally for 1 and a black. Whenever Zulapur Cutthroat or another creature we control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and we gain 1 life. Gary himself, Grey Merchant of Asphodel. He's a 2/4 Zamboni for 3 black, black. When Grey Merchant of Asphodel enters the battlefield, each opponent loses X life, where X is our devotion to black, and we gain that much life. Moving on to our main sacrifice outlets and the 1 infinite combo in the deck. We have Viscera Seer, a 1/1 vampire wizard for 1 black. We sacrifice a creature, scry 1. Altar of Dementia, it's an artifact for 2. We sacrifice a creature, target player puts a number of cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power from the top of their library into their graveyard. This next part here is our infinite in the deck. It starts with Ashnod's Altar. It's an artifact for 3. Sacrifice a creature to add colorless to your mana pool. A Reassembling Skeleton. It's a 1/1 skeleton warrior for 1 and a black. We can pay 1 and a black to return Reassembling Skeleton from our graveyard to the battlefield. Bog Initiate. It's a 1/1 wizard for 1 and a black. We can pay 1 to add black to our mana pool. The way this works is we have Ashnod's Altar. We sacrifice Reassembling Skeletons to the altar to get 2 colorless mana. We then filter 1 of it into Bog Initiate to make a black, which gives us a colorless and a black, that we can then pay for Reassembling Skeleton's ability to bring it back to the battlefield. And then we repeat the process with our commander out. We can make an infinite number of 2/2 Zambonis. If we have something like Zulapur Cutthroat out, we can infinitely deal damage to our opponents. This part here is called Things You See in a Graveyard. All of these cards put stuff into our graveyard that we can then get out later. Burning Rune Demon. It's a 6/6 Demon Berserker for 4 black, black. This is flying. When it enters the battlefield, we may search our library for exactly 2 cards not named Burning Rune Demon that have different names. If we do, reveal those cards, an opponent chooses one of them, puts the chosen card into our hand, and the other into our graveyard. We then shuffle the library. Violent Tumor is a 2/2 Zamboni Warlock for 2 black, black. It has Death Touch, and when it enters the battlefield, we may search our library for a card, and put that card into the graveyard, and then shuffle. Next up, we have Behold the Beyond, a sorcery for 5 black, black. We discard our hand, then search our library for 3 cards, and put those cards into our hand, then shuffle our library. We have Buried Alive, sorcery for 2 and a black. Search our library for up to 3 creature cards, and put them into the graveyard. We then shuffle. Corpse Churn, it's an instant for 1 and a black. We put the top 3 cards of our library into the graveyard, then we may return a creature from our graveyard to our hand. Dark Blast, it's an instant for 1 black. Target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn, but it has Dredge 3. If this is in our graveyard and we would draw a card, instead we may put this card into our hand by putting the top 3 cards of our library into the graveyard. Final Parting, it's a sorcery for 3 black. We search our library for 2 cards, put one of them into our hand, the other into the graveyard, then shuffle. Finally, we have Ransack the Lab. It's a sorcery for 1 and black. We look at the top 3 cards of our library, put one of them into our hand, the rest into the graveyard. This next section here is our reanimation effects. It's all going to be stuff that brings our creatures back from the graveyard. First up, we have Apprentice Necromancer. It's a 1/1 zombie wizard. It costs 1 and a black. We can pay black to tap, sacrifice it to return target creature from our graveyard to play. That creature gains haste. At the end of turn, we sacrifice it. Phyrexian Delver. It's a 3/2 Zamboni. It costs 3 black. When Phyrexian Delver enters the battlefield, we'll return target creature from our graveyard to the battlefield. We lose life equal to its mana cost. Shieldred Whispering 1. It's a 6/6 Praetor for 5 black. It has Swamp Walk. At the beginning of our upkeep, we'll return target creature from our graveyard to the battlefield. And then at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, that player sacrifices a creature. Next up, we have Cauldron's Gift. It's a sorcery for 4 and a black. It has Adamant. If at least 3 black mana was spent to cast this spell, put the top 4 cards of our library into the graveyard. You may choose a creature card in your graveyard. If you do, return it to the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. We have Victimize. It's a sorcery for 2 and a black. We choose 2 target creature cards in our graveyard. Sacrifice a creature. If you do, return the chosen cards to the battlefield. Strands of Night. It's an enchantment for 2 black. We can pay black and 2 life to sacrifice a swamp. If we do, we put target creature card from our graveyard into play. Animate Dead and Dance of the Dead. Both are enchantment auras that cost 1 and a black that will bring a creature back from our graveyard with that attached to it. We have Diabolic Servitude. It's an enchantment for 3 and a black. When Diabolic Servitude enters the battlefield, we return target creature from our graveyard to the battlefield. When that creature is put onto the battlefield with it dies, exile it, and then return Diabolic Servitude to our hand. And when Diabolic Servitude leaves the battlefield, exile the creature put onto the battlefield with Diabolic Servitude. Cauldron of Souls. It's an artifact for 5. We tap, choose any number of target creatures. Each of those creatures gain persist until end of turn. Persist means when it dies, if it had no -1/-1 counters on it, we return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with a -1/-1 counter on it. This next section is called Get That out of here. It's going to be all the cards that are going to take stuff from our graveyard and put it either back into our hand or exile it to trigger our Tormod. These first 3 creatures here, when they enter the battlefield, they'll return a creature from our graveyard to our hand. Cadaver Imp. It's a 1/1 imp that costs 1 black. It's flying. When Cadaver Imp enters the battlefield, we may return target creature from our graveyard to our hand. We have Gravedigger. It's a 2/2 Zamboni for 3 and a black. When Gravedigger enters play, we may return a creature from our graveyard to our hand. Ghoul Raiser. It's a 2/2 Zamboni for 1 black. When Ghoul Raiser enters the battlefield, we return a Zamboni card at random from our graveyard to our hand. We have Morgue Theft and Stitch Together. Morgue Theft is a sorcery for 1 and a black. Return target creature from your graveyard to hand. It also has Flashback for 4 and a black, so we can get its value a second time. Stitch Together works the same way. It's a sorcery for black. Return target creature card from our graveyard to our hand. It also has Threshold. We return that card from our graveyard to the battlefield instead if we have 7 or more cards in our graveyard. Undertaker. It's a 1/1 human spell shaper, costs 1 and a black. For black, we can tap and discard a card to return a creature card from our graveyard to our hand. We have 2 enchantments in Phyrexian Reclamation and Tortured Existence that will return a creature from our graveyard to our hand. Phyrexian Reclamation, it costs 1 black, 1 and a black. We can pay 2 life to return target creature from our graveyard to our hand. Tortured Existence costs 1 black, and for 1 black, we can discard a creature card to return another target creature card from our graveyard to our hand. We have Decaying Soil. It's an enchantment for 1 black. At the beginning of our upkeep, we exile a card from our graveyard from the game. If we have Threshold, whenever a non-token creature is put into our graveyard from play, we may pay 1. If we do, we turn that card to our hand. Oversold Cemetery. It's an enchantment for 1 and a black. At the beginning of our upkeep, if we have 4 or more creature cards in our graveyard, we may return a creature card from our graveyard to our hand. We have 2 creatures. Cemetery Reaper. It's a 2/2 Zamboni for 1 black. Other Zambonis, creatures we control, get +1/+1. And then for 2 and a black, we can tap, exile a creature card from our graveyard to put a 2/2 black Zamboni creature token onto the battlefield. And then Rank Officer. It's a 3/1 Zamboni soldier for 3 and a black. When Rank Officer enters the battlefield, you may discard a card. If you do, create a 2/2 black Zamboni creature token. And then for 1 and a black, we can tap, exile a creature from our graveyard. Each opponent loses 2 life. This section here is Relentless Creatures. These are creatures that can come back pretty easily from the graveyard. Butcher Ghoul. It's a 1/1 Zamboni for 1 and a black. It has Undying. When this creature dies, if it had no +1/+1 counters on it, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with a +1/+1 counter. Death Tyrant, a 4/6 Beholder Skeleton for 4 and a black. It has Menace. Negative Energy Cone. Whenever an attacking creature you control or a blocking creature an opponent controls dies, create a 2/2 black Zamboni creature token. And then for 5 and a black, we can return Death Tyrant from our graveyard to the battlefield tapped. We have Evan Death, Draco Lich, 5/2 Legendary Zamboni Dragon, costs 2 black. It has Flash, Flying, it enters the battlefield tapped, but we may cast it from the graveyard if a creature not named Evan Death Draco Lich had died this turn. Gravecrawler, a 2/1 Zamboni that costs black. Gravecrawler can't block. We may cast Gravecrawler from our graveyard as long as we control a Zamboni. Nether Trader, a 1/1 Spirit, costs black, has haste, it has Shadow, meaning this creature can block or be blocked by only creatures with Shadow. Whenever another creature is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, you may pay black. If you do, return Nether Trader from the graveyard to the battlefield. And finally, the last 3 cards create an additional tokens. We have Diregraph Colossus. It's a 2/2 Zamboni Giant, costs 2 and a black. Diregraph Colossus enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each Zamboni card in your graveyard. Whenever you cast a Zamboni spell, put a 2/2 black Zamboni creature token onto the battlefield tapped. You have Desecrated Tomb. It's an artifact for 3. Whenever one or more creature cards leave your graveyard, create a 1/1 black bat creature token with flying. Lastly, we have Wand of Orcus. It's a legendary artifact equipment, costs 2 and a black. Whenever equipped creature attacks or blocks, it and Zambonis you control gain Death Touch until end of turn. Whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, create that many 2/2 black Zamboni creature tokens, and has an equip cost of 3. Well, there you go, everyone. That's the deck. If you have any suggestions, please let me know down below, and I'll see you in the next one.